This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, we encourage devotees to switch on the video because not many people are there today. So we are starting the session after a long time, 6 weeks. And today we are starting the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. It's called the modes of material nature. So in the 13th chapter, when we were doing the 13th chapter, 13th chapter deals with these questions which Arjuna asks. What is Prakriti? What is Purusha? What is Kshetra? What is Kshetrajna? What is Jnanam? What is Gnayam? We all know that Bhagavad Gita is divided. It basically, when devotees analyze Bhagavad Gita, they say that there are 5 important topics Bhagavad Gita deals with. One is Jivatma, Paramatma, Prakriti, Purusha, and Karma, and Jivatma, Paramatma, Kala, Karma, and Prakriti, right? So some of them are tackled here: Prakriti, Purusha, Jnanam, and Gnayam, object of knowledge, that is Paramatma. Is described, Kshetram is described from the body point of view, Jivatma, Kshetrajna, Paramatma. Kshetrajna and Jnanam are quite interlinked there. So Arjuna, Krishna answers the questions 3 and 4 first, in 13.2 and 13.2.3. And then Jnanam, the knowledge, the process of knowledge is very detailedly explained. And there are so many characteristics of knowledge that they were there. And so we had also, each one of them we had discussed, and all of you have also contributed to that. Thanks a lot. And then he describes who is the object of knowledge, that is Paramatma, Krishna himself. And then he talks about Purusham, the enjoyer of the matter, and the very material nature. Today I was had a good opportunity to meet Simangala Prabhu, and he was talking about material science that he has read, and he wants to do a presentation on that. So there's basically here, this is the topic that one second. The material nature is a topic that has interested many scientists, and the 14th chapter basically connects these two things. Yeah, 14th chapter basically connects these two. So 13th chapter explained how the living entity Purusha is entangled with external energy called Prakriti. Okay, due to his desire for enjoyment. This is what 13th chapter is. How the Purusha gets entangled with external energy, that is Prakriti, that what we see, the nature, due to his desire for enjoyment. And chapter 14 explains how material energy, because he's get entangled with the material external energy because of his thing, because he wanted to enjoy. And then the 14th chapter basically describes when the person gets attracted or entangled into that, how the material energy binds the soul through the 3 modes of material nature, as indicated in 13.22, where this knowledge is further explained. So the key verses that connect 13th chapter to 14th chapter is 13.22. This is what we need to say, and they come as a part of the enjoyer of the matter. So with this understanding, that we will go to the another very important topic of the modes of material nature, because modes of material nature also, even though they may look very theoretical, but it has got a lot of practical significance. A majority of the problems that we face in our life, individually, in families particularly, and also when we move along with other people in society and in offices, we face a lot of hurdles, right? We face hurdles, we face challenges, we face problems, and the small problems become very big problems. Sometimes they become insurmountable problems also. So of course, not all problems we can control. It's not that within our capacity we can manage, but if we can manage the problems that we have, we see, we perceive, we experience through the lenses of the knowledge that is given in Bhagavad Gita, to quite an extent, our outlook to deal with the problematic situations decreases. That is what we get to know in 14th chapter. And in 16th chapter, as individual, how we can ensure that we don't become a source or a trigger to the anxiety that we can cause to others. That is the divine and demonic qualities in the 16th chapter. But at least in the 14th chapter, it gives us an understanding what we should be aware of and in what way we should understand the three modes of material nature, because we are all entangled. We wanted to desire enjoyment. So our level of desire of enjoyment also has a different layers, right? First is that we want to at a higher level, we want our community to be happy. We want to enjoy that, right? We want to enjoy that being in the community, and then probably from community to the extended family, and from extended family to a nucleus family, and within the nucleus family to within ourselves. So the desire for enjoyment is there in different layers. At any layer, something is disconnected, or then there is a pain. But higher levels of disconnection doesn't pain us that much, because if you have a large community and we want to enjoy in that community, that piece is not there, it's okay, we can manage a lower level family. And then within our own family, nucleus family, that enjoyment is broken, and that becomes too much of a hardship. And then if it comes to that broken or unhappiness in the situation becomes hitting us, it becomes much more tough. The purpose of which we came here is that we wanted to enjoy, and we got in control of this prakriti, this material nature, through the modes of material nature, and then we are suffering. So even though Krishna gave us this material world to enjoy in a way, but he's also made us to suffer, because there are the two reasons. The first thing is we making ourselves suffer. Krishna is not asking us to suffer. We, because of the three modes, we don't understand the three modes of material nature, we suffer. And there's also a little bit of suffering given by the Daiva Shakti. This Tapatraya is there, right? The misery is caused by ourselves, misery is caused by others, and misery is caused by the controllers, because that tapa has to be given for us to constantly remember, and as a reminder that this is not actually a place to live. And the desire for enjoyment that we have is in a way kind of misplaced. However, we should definitely remember that there are ample opportunities given in this material world also for us to be reasonably happy to some extent, to get up peacefully, sleep peacefully, go through the life peacefully, provided we set our objectives of life properly. And luckily, since we are in the society and under the care of Srila Prabhupada, who has very lucidly and very nicely explained these topics to make us remember the importance of these very important subject matters. So it is not just theoretical, there is a lot of practical value in this, and that is the reason why these chapters are, the acharyas tell us that there can be a speculative discussion. These can be understood through philosophical speculation. Normally we see the word, Srila Prabhupada said, don't speculate, don't concoct, right? So through speculation, sometimes concoction happens, but these topics, acharyas say that you can speculate. What do they mean by speculate? Is that we can discuss honestly and frankly to see where is our fault line. Where are we going? One second, probably. Where are we going wrong in our lives? So this is very important. It's not only subject matter of one person. It is. One second, Prabhu. Why is snipping tool has come? Yeah, I think now it's clearly visible, right?
Yeah, yes, Prabhuji, yes. Yeah.
Sorry about it. So with this understanding, we'll go to three more. So we'll try to listen and understand, discuss very carefully each of those shlokas, what is being told, so that somewhere down the line, if it helps us in our life to make our life better, there is nothing like it, right? So this is our aim. So I'll just move on to the 14th. Before I move to the 14th chapter, okay, so let's go to the 14th chapter. One second, you will see the screen rolling for some time. It's a bit disturbing, but just hold on. I'll have to move to that slide. Can someone read this, please? I'll just switch on my camera now. I'll just move out and to switch on the AC, but you can start reading.
Chapter
Can
13.
someone? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah. See, three modes of nature. Verse 14.1 to 14.4, the liberation and conditioning of the living entity. 14.5 to 14.9, description of the binding of the pure soul by the three modes. Race for prominence. 14.10 to 14.13, recognizing the supremacy a mode within a person. A. Actions in the modes. 14.14 to 14.18, actions and death within the modes. P. Pure life. 14.19 to 14.27, transcending the modes. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
So the acronym for this chapter is trap, whereas the 13th chapter was wise, where Arjuna was asking questions and Krishna answering. And this is called trap because we are talking about three modes and we are all entrapped into these three modes. So the way they've very nicely given these sections is very interesting. So in the 1 to 4, the liberation and conditioning of the living entity is described. Okay. So typically it starts with Krishna glorifying the knowledge that he's going to speak now. So knowledge is first glorified, and then he says by him, that means by Krishna, who is the Supreme Lord, the material energy is impregnated with the living entities. So he's basically also establishes his position as a Supreme Personality of the Godhead, was the material energy, what the material energy we see is basically impregnated with the living entities. That's how the material energy and material world comes into being. And 14.5 to 14.9, a description of the binding of the pure soul by the three modes. This is a very interesting thing that we all need to realize. The eternal entity connects with the material energy through the conditioning of these three modes. So if the eternal energy, eternal living entity had it connected with material energy without any issue, straight away, life would have been very good. But the Lord has kept three modes of material nature in between, and these three modes of material nature basically influences the way the eternal living entity, whose soul is very pure, connects with this material energy, and the whole problem starts. So one is conditioned by the mode of goodness, okay, that is sattva-guna, passion, rajoguna, ignorance. Ignorance is andhakar, right? The lack of knowledge, that is tamoguna. So goodness leads us to happiness, passion leads us to do more and more fruitful activities, and the ignorance leads us to kind of a madness. Madness, at least from a scriptural sense, it is madness because we are nowhere near even to be receptive to know what is good and what is bad. So these are the very important things to know, and again, these are not very compartmentalized. So they're in a combination. These three things can evolve into multiple millions and millions of combinations. And in our own lifetime, during any day, some modes sometimes are more dominant, sometimes the modes are less dominant. And not only within us, even within the nature, acharyas are telling us during the different parts of the day, some modes are very dominant, and if during other parts of the day, some modes are less dominant. For example, in the morning, they say that the mode of goodness is more dominant. In the night, as in the evening, the passion and things like that are more dominant. So like that they say. So even the timing of the days also is pretty important. So 14.5 to 14.9, the modes bind this pure soul, and that's why we say the soul is conditioned. Soul cannot be corrupted because soul itself has got a unique characteristics, but soul can be conditioned. Just like the way air, when it passes through air conditioner, we call it, right? Air condition doesn't create air. It only ensures that there is a cool kind of a, the cooling material is there, uh, or cool electricity cools certain parts of that thing. And when the natural air, when it sucks the air, when it passes through the air, we get a very cool air. So the air is same, but it gets conditioned by the air conditioner, the equipment, and that's why it's called the air conditioner. So that is 4.5 to 4.9. Then 4.10 to 4.13, recognizing the supremacy of a mode within a person. So recognizing the mode, what mode is acting very dominantly is very, very clearly is given. So it's also very interesting for us to know there are two aspects, right? One is that we need to know ourselves. What is that mode that is more dominant in us? Is there anything that we can do to improve ourselves? So once we very introspectively, very transparently try to reason out within ourselves with an objective that we want to move towards more of goodness, not only for the benefit of us, for the benefit of people around us. If you make a self analysis within us, then it's good. So it's good to recognize where we are in the modes of goodness, or modes of passion and modes of ignorance. That's one very important thing if we can do. And then next step is that we can also analyze, we can also able to see from the knowledge that we gain in others, what is the mode of goodness, what is their mode of passion, what is their mode of ignorance, from our own understanding. So that the advantage is that then we can adjust our relationship, the way we deal with certain entities. Because if you know by default somebody is in a mode of passion or ignorance, suppose our life partner is there. One life partner A can see another life partner having a very dominant mode of passion or mode of ignorance. And once we know that, through the understanding of Bhagavad Gita, by experience we may be able to come to know. But Bhagavad Gita helps us to give that good lens of clarity to understand this. Because even though we know, suppose if a partner A sees the other partner B as very passionate and very ignorant, there's always an anxiety and there'll always be a fight to correct it. But Bhagavad Gita, to fight, not to correct it, because of that not knowing that this is because of the modes that person is dominated with, there's always a fight. But there's a more fight, less understanding. But what Bhagavad Gita teaches us through these modes of material nature is that it helps us to analyze that this person is having this problem. That's why he's behaving like this. So in what way I can help myself and help others, or the other person, to come out of that dominant mode, which is not a favorable mode. If somebody is in mode of goodness, there is no problem. But most of us are not in mode of goodness. Most of us are in mode of passion and mode of ignorance. So in that way, this chapter helps us quite a lot in understanding how do we deal with those persons. And sometimes it so happens that we find somebody, even if it comes to be a life partner or friend or a colleague in the college, in the office, who may be having too much of a mode of passion. We may not be able to correct every situation, but we may be able to arrange the way we react and interact with them. So first thing is to attack a problem, right? If you can't attack a problem, how to dodge a problem, right? And then stay put instead of getting trapped. That is very important, right? Even in the games also it is like, if you can't hit a ball, you dribble. In the football, if you in cricket also, if you want to give an example, if you can't hit a thing, just leave that ball, don't meddle with it. As long as it doesn't come to hit your stump, then if you can't hit, at least you play a defense thing, right? At least you survive that ball, so that next ball when it comes, there may be a chance that you can hit it. So like that, it helps us to defend ourselves and dodge and create a space to the extent possible within our own self, within the environment, so that reaction, that influence of that passion or ignorance in that person is not that. So for every mode to act, there is a trigger. So once we know that a person whom we are dealing is having too much of a passion, too much of an ignorance, we can see what are the things that are triggering those things modes into its effect. So when we understand the factors of trigger, then we try to avoid those factors of trigger, and that will help us to some extent normalize it. I'm not telling that everything is solved in this process, but to my experience of practicing this, to very little practice, I'm not saying I'm a full practitioner, but after I read this chapter several years back, I somehow try to map whenever there's an unfavorable situation that comes to me, which is sustained. Now and then sparks, very rare sparks now and then that can be let off, because they don't really bother you much. But sustained period of issues with people can be sorted if you really understand this chapter sincerely, to practice what we understand, to also help others to understand and make them practice. So it has got a very high practical utility in our lives, this chapter. Whereas in the 9th chapter, 7th chapter, 12th chapter, there's a very high practicality with respect to how to become a devotee. This chapter has a much underlying foundational knowledge that we need to practice even to come to that stage of devotion, right? In 9th chapter, Krishna simply says that, Manmana bhakto madhyajimam namaskuru mame vaishasya yuktaivam. So how do we do that? How can we manmanam? How can we keep our mind and soul in the Krishna? There has to be something that is there in us to do that, right? So that fuel, that propensity, that potency to follow the instructions of Krishna in 12th chapter, 9th chapter, 7th chapter, some of them are given here. So that is the importance of this chapter. So that's why it may not have a, if you may call it the devotional coefficient, right? Devotional thing, shlokas related to direct devotion, we may not find in this, but we find a lot of practical things that can make our life happy. When our life becomes happy, there is a chance that our devotion life also we can make it a bit happier. But if our life itself is not happy, then it's difficult to make our devotion life happy. It's very difficult. Some people do it still, whatever in difficulties they may have at home, at work, in society, they still are latched on to remembering Krishna. But it's for people like us who are just an average people, it's very difficult. So that's why this is very important, the 10th to 13th shlokas. And then 14 to 18 basically describes the acting and dying within the modes. So what happens when people die in mode of passion, ignorance, and goodness? So that's also pretty important, because we live, I think I told this more than once, forgive me, again I tell you that most of our actions somehow are well directed if we decide, given a chance, how we want to leave this world and what should people around us think about us. This is coming from Stephen Covey, a very famous author of 7 Habits for Most Effective People. He says that your life will be decided based on that, if you know what it is like. So that's why he says you think that you are in a coffin, you are about to be buried, you are dead. Just imagine, it's a very interestingly hypothetical scenario. And near and dear, your office colleagues, probably your friends and relatives have come and they're mourning or whatever, and they're about to put your coffin down on the earth and bury it, and that's it, that's for all gone, once for done and dusted. So at that time in the morning, the homage happens, right? What do people want to remember about you? You just deeply think, and you keep thinking in your life, several phases of your life, and that will change the way you think and act. So if you want to be, if I want to be remembered like a person who has gained a lot of money, hook or crook or whatever, I want to be known as rich person, I will act in such a way to make myself to get rich. Whether I succeed or not, it's a different issue. If I want to become very powerful, get a lot of power, get a lot of followers, I will act in that way. If I want to defeat everybody around me, be a victor, I will become like that. If I want to be known as a good person, like a lot of people who came to see me off in the with the coffin, they want to say that, okay, this person was a good person after all. He tolerated a lot of things. We never seen him, doing many bad things. At least he always tried to help. The way we live will be different. Our whole of our objectives will be set. So, and this has to be there. And for us, particularly people living in Dubai, this is also important because we have two things, right? One, majority of us, not all, majority of us, we live here temporarily and we go back to our home countries at a certain point in time, right? So that is also kind of a death in a sense that we leave one's environment, one situation, and we go to other place. So how do we want to live? Suppose if I am thinking at this my age, it's very, very clear. My last days are coming near here. So what do I want to be remembered when I go? So even when something is coming into my mind through the modes of material nature, through the modes of influence of passion and lust or ignorance, I keep thinking it. Suppose if I commit anything like that, so maybe I'll be remembered like that when I leave Damodar Desh. Do I want to live like that? Can I curb this at this point in time so that the way I want to be remembered when I leave is what it matters to me more than just falling prey to some kind of a sense gratification now. So that balance, mind balance, and mind will decide, generally decides, let me curb this because I don't want to get into this issue now just to satisfy my own senses or just to showcase my superiority or my seniority or my age, than spoiling that image of me, what people are going to think about me when I leave. So this is very important. So that's why action, death in the modes are very well described. So if I leave from Dubai in the mode of seemingly less passionate, seemingly less ignorant, though not in the mode of goodness. Mode of goodness is far greater, difficult to achieve. Seemingly less passionate, seemingly ignorant, probably for my objective of life, that is more satisfying for me on the day when I get on board the flight to go back to my home country, home state. I'll be reasonably satisfied. That gives me immense satisfaction rather than how much I've gained wealth or how much of whatever I've done. So I'm just giving a personal example, but that way these shlokas are extremely important. They give us an idea what happens when we die. Death is only one comma in the whole journey, right? Death means a change, a kind of almost an irreversible change. So leaving from Damodar Desh to our home country, to 80% of the people, it's an irreversible change. 20% do come back to Dubai, but again, even if they come back, they come with a different job, different situation. So it's like a reincarnation. It so happened that they're coming back to Dubai, but it's a change. Any significant change is what we can think as a death, because that's generally not easily reversible. And then, of course, Krishna gives the solution very nicely. How can we transcend this mode? Because these modes are entangling us. This is what we learned. And how do we get out of this entanglement is what this whole chapter says. And so the 1 to 18 gives the issues, the problems, the details of the problems, the dangers of the problems, and how do we deal with it. But 19 to 27 basically helps us to give an insight into how can we transcend these three modes so that we can move from goodness to pure goodness, which will open our gateway to the abode of the Lord. So this, in that way, I've given a long introduction for a very specific reason, to instill in all of us, including me, the importance of the 14th chapter. I just give a pause here if anyone wants to share something before we move forward.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, yeah, please don't roll the screen. Yeah. So the first page, the description is very, very attractive, Prabhuji. I think it's very much relevant to our conditions and our practical life. So all the description is really it's creating an interest to look into the chapter actually. So it's on the, is it money? What is that? Mahamani Prabhu's this one PPT, Prabhuji?
No, this is the PPT that we have used in Essence of Bhagavad Gita course, Amritananda Prabhu's PPT.
Sorry, Amritananda Prabhu. Yeah. That's very nice description, Prabhuji. Wonderful.
Yeah, I'll just stop sharing. I just want some kind of interaction now. Yes, anyone wants to share something?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, I want to ask one question on this, Prabhu. So,
Yeah.
mode of ignorance, mode of fashion, and mode of goodness, Prabhu. Prabhu, so obviously we should always desire to move toward mode of goodness. Obviously, that's the aim of the life. But Prabhu, in doing that, there will be a lot of stages where we commit mistakes in trying to reach somewhere, right? I mean, it's always possible that trying to reach somewhere, we will take some risk and obviously they make some mistakes. Now, when you give the example of leaving the cricket ball when you can't play it and then leave it for the next and wait for the next, but sometimes it could be that leaving the ball, time is running against you and you might lose the game because balls are less. I'm just giving an example to you both. So, Prabhu, one first question is that do we leave a ball when the time is running? How do we gauge that situation? Second question, Prabhu, related to this is in reaching mode of goodness, we might harm people. Is that being selfish also because we want to reach mode of goodness, but in trying to do that, we might harm some people or might do something which is not good for somebody else, but obviously I am moving toward mode of goodness. I want to move towards mode of goodness. I want to be remembered as a good person. So just confused on that, Prabhu. If you can throw some light on that, please.
Yeah, I'll try my best, Prabhu. Thanks for answering. It's a very important question. So whole of this 14th chapter will go in this mode only, because acharyas are telling us, acharyas are authorizing us to understand this chapter through philosophical speculation. So we have that liberty to do that. So first question, Prabhu, the idea of reading Bhagavad Gita, at least at this stage of life, is that we do not get into a situation where we will be scared to leave a ball thinking that our run rate will increase fast. Increase. You got my point? So we should not be, we should be in a situation where we can easily afford to leave a ball to stay, survive, and hit a ball when it is right to hit. That means we have played good enough so that we have a buffer in the last, last over or last 2-3 hours. So that's point number one. Is it practically possible? Can we achieve it? We don't know. But acharyas have told, if you see the great people's lives, they have somehow managed to have a situation like, they only need to score 2-3 runs in the last over or something like that. I'm just telling. I'm just giving an example.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, clear, bro.
So that is so. If you instead of worrying, if I do this, if I leave the ball, then I am not able to have a chance to score runs. Is that thought, you should forget it. We should go with a positive mindset that if you lead a life as it is told in 14th chapter and in 16th chapter and in 15th chapter, in the Jnana section of the Bhagavad Gita, 17th chapter, we will be very well placed in the what do you call the slog overs. Okay, there is more pressure from the Maya on the Maya than us. Otherwise, there will be less pressure on Maya and more pressure on us. So that's point number one. Second point is that you said, you have used a word that when our aim is to go to mode of goodness. That is correct. In our journey to become slightly a better person, we may use the word harm, Prabhu, but from an English point of view, I want to correct that harm may not be the right word there, because I don't think if you move towards goodness, you will harm anybody. You may cause inconvenience or discomfort to somebody, not harm.
Yes, Prabhu.
Because
Agree, Prabhu.
when you are moving to goodness, even though suppose if I am there, my wife is not cooperating with me, for example, she's not there, I think, in the forum, right? Yeah. And I may cause some discomfort to her. I'm not harming her, because if I move towards goodness, automatically as my life partner, she will also get chance to become good somewhere, right? Assuming that my wife is bad, or if my wife is going in the goodness, if I'm not, she's not harming, she's only causing me a slight discomfort. That's point number two that we need to understand. So we don't have to be worried that we'll harm somebody, because we cannot harm somebody. Why? If we believe in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is asking us to go towards mode of goodness. Krishna would not give any instruction to us that will cause harm to us or harm to the people surrounding us. To
Yes.
the extent he said that you kill Arjuna, he asked Arjuna to take up violence to kill, that is the highest form of harm to others. But still he
Yes.
says there is a benefit because all the people who got killed in front of Krishna, seeing Krishna, actually got liberation.
Yes, Prabhu.
Right? So there is no question of harm when it comes to the following of teachings of Bhagavad Gita, but there could be some cause of a temporary discomfort to others when they see us following. They may get agitated, they may feel uncomfortable, they may criticize us sometimes. They may, in my language, I don't know what is it called in English, Helana we call it. In Hindi also Helana is there, right? That word. They sarcastically, they point something, they comment on us and things like that. That is fine.
Yes,
That's a part of our karma that we are doing. Yeah, I hope I've answered your question, Prabhu.
No, Prabhu, very nicely correlated with the killing of the people in Mahabharata. The instruction given, that makes me very clear what you said.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Anybody else wants to comment? Sadhu Sevan Prabhu said, can we consider this as a test match? Yes, why not? This is definitely a very good way to look at it. Yeah, so shall we proceed with the shlokas and then with the meanings, which are, is okay? Can I?
Yes, please. Yes, you can. Please go ahead.
Or anyone wants to? So are we all eager to know what is there in 14th chapter now?
Yes, sure.
Yes,
sure.
Prabhu. Surely, Prabhu.
Are we all committing to ourselves that we would try to become slightly more good after reading this chapter? I think yes.
Last one in the description, chapter description, it says transcending the modes. I'm really getting interested to know how, I mean, we can transcend the modes. That's very difficult things, right? The modes of material nature is so strong, the transcending those modes. So really, I'm feeling very interested in that. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Sure. Thank you, Prabhu.
And Prabhu,
So,
how to be remindful
yes.
of how to be reminded us only this mode of material nature is controlling us, and how to remain in that consciousness all the time, Prabhu, because sometimes we are so carried away with our regular activities, we tend to forget, okay, we are not the body and we are soul. We often, in my case, I often forget while in the busy schedule. So how to be remindful of okay, the mode of material nature is controlling. We should not succumb to this situation. So we need to just let this thing pass. You don't react to that situation. Everything will be calmed down and it is a testing phase by Maya. So how we can be practically applying this because many a times. Yeah, Prabhu. Yeah.
Yeah, Acharyas have given a very simple example, Prabhu, for this. I'll replay that example with your life thing itself. Your basic fundamental question is, how do I remember myself that I am under the modes of material nature, right? The first thing is, we know that we cannot control everything. We cannot control ourselves in several situations, right? There is something that we can control and there is something that we cannot control in others. So that itself shows that there is something which is going on without our control to a large extent. That's point number one. But how do I remain in that consciousness? I'll ask you one counter question. You are saying that you are forgetting that you are under the control of modes of material nature, right? Sometimes when I say you, I am also same like you, Prabhu. Just don't think that different. We are all equal here. We are all same here. Each one is a principle. But if I ask a question, do you at any point in time in your day time, I'm talking about daytime, night, forget it, forget Diya?
Many a time.
No, but many a times you may not forget, but you may, because you are focusing on your work, that she may not. But if I just come and quickly tap, how is Diya? Would Diya come to your mind or not?
Yeah, definitely.
Why she has come to your mind? Because she's always there, present in your mind.
Yes.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have talked about it. If I asked you something about what happened to Stalin in your DMK, can you tell? You don't, because that's far away in your mind. But whereas Diya is very much part of your life, a life, a person who is constantly giving joy and enjoyment. You enjoy, she enjoys. She's a spark of your house, and she's the future of your family. You like her, and you want to do anything for her. You take a lot of, you may take austerities. You may suppress your anger. You do what because you like her. You believe her that she's going to give you happiness, society wise, home wise, and she's making your life a kind of a paradise, right? In all practical purposes. So same way, if you believe in Krishna, if you believe in his instruction, and what is he telling? Krishna instructions are always there with us. We may not consciously feel it, but Krishna is there very near to us. Or when a moment comes, we can quickly remember that we are being controlled by the modes of nature. One simple example is, if we internalize our knowledge and practice, then we know one thing. Even when we go into get into the situations of being very angry within our family life, we know that we are getting angry. That's very, very important. And that anger is controlled. And we got angry because it is just that we cannot understand what the hell is happening. We got angry, but we also can easily set limits to that anger. Why? Because we internally, we know by reading Bhagavad Gita that I am doing it because now my mode of passion is more dominant than my mode of ignorance. If we have that, that is good enough. So automatically, whatever is there, it automatically comes, because the knowledge that I am always under the control of these, and I always have three tapatrayas haunting me as long as I'm in this world. Misery is caused by myself, misery is caused by others, misery is caused by the external forces. That remembrance will come. It's only practice.
Yes, Prabhu. Thanks a lot, Prabhu. Like a very apt, yeah.
That
Very
is the
apt
difference
example,
between.
Prabhu. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the difference. That is the advantage of knowledge. So in the Bhagavad Gita, after telling devotional service is supposed to be the highest, right? Bhakti yoga and the yoga ladder is highest.
Yes,
Why
yes.
the Jnana yoga is told after Bhakti yoga? There is some reason, right? Because Jnana also has some kind of a foundation in sadhaka bhaktas, sustain that bhakti. Bhakti is good. Like bhakti, like in the COVID situation, we can give an example. I mean, just a very loosely coupled example. Bhakti is like oxygen. Without oxygen, we cannot live. But we should be able to put ourselves in a situation where we can get oxygen, right? If we go to a place, where you can't get good air to breathe, then it's a problem. So it's not a problem of oxygen, it's a problem of us, because we are not in a position where we can breathe, right? So same way, this jnana helps us to constantly remind ourselves that we are under the control. So there is one very good statement, right, in the Bhagavad Gita course also we have seen. As you said, you remember that we are not the body, we are the spirit soul. And the other important thing is we are not the doers. And that line comes here very loud and clear. It came also in the 13th chapter. We are not the doers, because all that what we are doing is under the modes of three modes of material nature. All that we are doing is under the influence of these three modes of material nature. So if you remember that, then the fundamental question comes: if I am doing everything under the modes of material nature, how can I influence this mode of material nature? How can I ensure that these modes of material nature, instead of acting against me, act in favor of me? Right? It is same thing, right? When an aircraft has to flow, is aircraft creating some air for it to flow, or it is just ensuring that there is some vacuum created underneath or in the backside so that it becomes light to fly, right? That's all it's doing, right? When the engine rotates, it's not creating air, it is creating a favorable situation for it to fly. So same way, when it wants to land, it's creating a favorable situation for it to. So by changing the circumstances around it, of course, around it means by whatever mechanism or whatever the design that is done. So that is what we need to remember, and that is the reason why we are discussing like this, all these things. But we are constantly reminding ourselves that this is what is the issue, that we are not the doers, but you are doing. So that's a major issue. But it's not an helpless situation. Like Sumangal Prabhu has pointed out, that the last section is very interesting. If Krishna has not told that section, In actually in every most of the chapters it is like this. 15th also it is like this. 16th chapter also it is like that. 14th chapter also like this. Krishna gives all the details and he says that you are entangled, you are bound, you are this, and if you are, and he doesn't leave us in lurch. He basically also tells the solution. And this is a solution. The end is a solution. But for us to know the solution, you need to know the problem, root cause.
Yeah, correct. Yes.
You got my
Right,
point?
Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. Like
Prabhu.
very nice
Yeah.
way of explaining, Prabhu. Like it will be remembered for a long time. So I just got reminded of one statement by His Grace Amarendra Prabhu. So he told like how to, because we all know like we are very busy in our work schedule. So how to remind of Krishna, like how to remember Krishna. So just whatever activity you are doing, like have a checklist either every half an hour or every 1 hour. You are just going to say like a one Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Whatever like a however busy you are, just put a alarm in every 30 minutes, like a just you are going to say one time, okay, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Then you do your work. Like so he told that this he could able to follow for some months, and like he got so light like in his busy schedule. So I thought like nice to share it in this forum, so we also can try to practice this one, Prabhu.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for sharing. But there are different techniques also. We can adopt any technique that is comfortable. I practically tell you what I do. I put that our Chotu Mala is there, small Mala is there, right? That 28 malas bead.
Yes.
I keep it in my pocket.
Okay.
So whenever stressful thing is there, it reminds me that I have to chant. So that's one way of doing it. Some people keep the photos of the Mukund Prabhu was there, our dear Mukund Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah.
He was my colleague, right?
Yes, Prabhu.
So in front of his desk, he used to keep one Radha Krishna photo, small photo. So probably he wanted to remember and see, but even it was a bit daring in my office, but still he was doing that. So different people have different techniques of remembering it. But yeah, we should have our own technique which suits us best to make us remember Krishna. And it's also sometimes helpful if you have surrounding people also as devotees. Like I used to have that very good privilege. In my own department, we had Dinanath Prabhu. Of course, now he is gone. He's retired. Recently went back to India, but he was very close with me. Like our offices were also very near, and almost every day, at least once, we used to some meeting. We used to be there together. So whenever I used to see him, there is a thing that devotees there, a congregation. Whenever he used to see me, he had some feeling. So we had that very nice association for 25 years together. And I have Madhu Prabhu also. Sometimes when his office is down, whenever I walk down, I just pop in and see and talk. In that way, there's always an association of devotees. So yeah, it helps. Different techniques, we can use it to different ways. Sometimes it's more. Some people have more engagement in the office. Sometimes we may not have it. And when we were in Imal in the project days, I used to have two devotees from Abu Dhabi congregation. We used to use sometimes we used to eat prasadam together in my office used to be very big. So lunchtime we used to discuss and we used to enjoy that. For a long time, it was very good for me that almost on a daily basis I used to get interaction with them. But it happens. It depends upon our lifestyle and things. We should not risk that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very personal thing on how we remember Krishna. But we have, and the main point is that we should try to attempt to do some technique through which we can remember. Yeah, that's important.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Prabhu. Thanks for that, Prabhu.
Prabhu, just one thing. In one of the lectures when we were having for the academic or Vedic sciences, you had mentioned there is a quiz which can tell us about which mode we are in.
Yeah,
I tried to find it. I tried to find, but I could not get it. If you can send that link or the quiz where available.
Yeah, today itself I'll send it, Prabhu.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you.
It's called Vedic Personality Index. I'll send it. You can do it and kindly do it and then share your score if you want next time during our. Fine.
Sure.
I'll
Thank
put
you,
it.
Prabhu.
Sure.
Thank you,
It's an Excel sheet. You have to download and do it, and it will work.
Okay, Prabhu. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding that, Prabhu. That's very important to do for us doing this chapter. Yeah. Anything else before we go to the first two shlokas? We'll do only 1 or 2 shlokas today, and then we can do slightly more at a faster pace next week, because I thought it's very important for us to have this intro. If no one has got anything to share, then I will go on. Yeah.
Prabhuji, just one point, small point. Prabhuji, as
Yeah.
you said, the problem and the solution. Almost all chapters have the problem and the solution. So knowing the problem, sometimes we ignore, we look for the solution, but it's not very good idea. But because knowing the problem is the very, very important, because if the problem is very clear to us, and the solution becomes actually almost half done, or half the solution is done if it was just by knowing the problem very nicely. So problem is equally important. That's why, when we used to go for exams, our parents used to say, read the problem nicely, read the problem correctly, read the problem twice or thrice, So that's why problem knowing is very, very important. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for telling that. I want to share something. My wife is not there, otherwise she would have definitely replied to your question. Recently, she's in a bit of an anxiety mode because one of her essays of Bhakti Vaibhav course, Radhika Nagar Prabhu has rejected and then asked her to resubmit. So she's in a bit of an anxiety now. It never happened to her before. So there are several comments. Radhika Nagar Prabhu said, you didn't do this right, you didn't do this right. Ultimate comment he made is that the problem is that you did not understand the question properly. That's why I cannot pass you in this. You have to resubmit completely. So this is important. This shows that, and we struggled with. We had 2 meetings together to understand the question. So what is the question and what is the teacher is expecting? So now we have come after 2 hours of effort, we could understand it. So what it means is sometimes it may look very simple, but to understand the problem and the question is very important. Yeah, what you said is right, true. We are practically going through. My wife would have given much more details because she's undergoing that pain right now. Maybe that's the reason why she didn't join. I asked her to complete that essay today. Okay. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha. This is the 7th, the 14th chapter start with Sri Krishna's telling.
Prabhu, you need to share the screen, Prabhu.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Prabhu. Sorry. Yeah. Is it visible, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Sorry, Prabhu. I forgot. Yeah. Font is also okay, right? For those people who are seeing in the laptops. Sri Bhagavanu Vacha Param Bhuya Pravakshyami Jnananam Jnanamuttamam Yajñātva Munahe Sarve Param Siddhim Ito Gataha. Can someone read the meaning?
Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, again, I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection.
So Krishna is giving assurance that if you go through again, because he has already given some aspects of knowledge in 13th chapter, so he's again further describing that. And if you know it, like the many sages who attained supreme perfection, a reader of Bhagavad Gita can also try to do it. So it's a pretty interesting shloka. Krishna himself is giving that assurance. And then we will go to the next shloka.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Supreme perfection. So this refers to the Krishna Bhakti, yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously. Perfection for us, for the people who are practicing devotional practitioners of devotion, perfection is bhakti. Idam jnanam upasritya mama sadharmyam agataha sarge pinopajayante pralayena vyathani cha. Yeah, can someone read the meaning?
By becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own. thus established one is not born at the time of creation or disturbed at the time of dissolution.
Yeah. So, Sumangal Prabhu, this answers your question. What is the perfection means? Getting the transcendental nature like him, that means going back to spiritual thing, world, and then not coming back. That is the perfection.
Yeah, yes.
Idam jnanam upasritya mama sadharmyam agataha sargepi no jayante pralaye na vyathani cha. This is what is there in this. And then we will come to the description of the purport slightly later in about 5 minutes time. And then Sri Krishna establishes thing, Mama yonir mahat brahma tasmin garbham dadamyaham sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata. The total material substance called Brahman is a source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the birth of all living beings, O son of Bharata. So here Krishna is telling how the material nature is born and how we are all born and how we get life from that. I impregnate, making. So he's again telling himself to be that he's a supreme, and then then he says how we get entangled. And this is a very important shloka, which is also quoted. I think it is also part of the Bhakti Shastri must remember shloka. Sarvayo nishu kaunteya murtyaya sambhavatyaha tasam brahma mahatyonir aham bija pradapita. Sarva yonishu kaunteya. So he is basically telling I should be understood that all species of life, Sarva Yonishu Kauntaya, O son of Kunti, Murtaya Sambhavanti Yaha, are made possible by birth in this material nature. Tasam Brahma Mahat Yonir, Aham Bija Prada Pita. I am the seed giving father. That means again, Krishna, like many there are shlokas in 9th chapter also, right? And this I am the father, grandsire. What is that shloka in 9th chapter? I forgot. I'm not able to recollect suddenly. Anyone recollects that shloka? Prabhu is talking about a grandsire and the son and the father, grandsire. Okay, I forgot. Okay, fine.
Prabhu, Ham Sarvasya Prabhu also have like similar meaning.
Yeah, I am Sarvasya Prabhu something. Mata Pita. What is that?
9.17 Prabhu.
What is that? Sorry, I forgot. What is that? I'm not.
I'm just looking up the website. It is Pitaham Asya Jagato Mata Dhata
Yeah, got it. Sorry, Prabhu. I just got sorry. Pitahamasya Jagato Mata Dhata Pitamaha Vejyam Sarva Omkara Ruksama Yajurevacha. So he's basically proclaiming himself as the seed giving father. Is the father, grandsire, and here he's saying Aham Bija Pradapita. And like Sadhu Sevan Prabhu said, 10th chapter 8th shloka is also in line with it. So he basically Krishna lays the foundation to tell who is he, how is he impregnating the material world, and the knowledge that he's going to give, what does it lead to? It leads us to the perfection. So we'll quickly see that how it happens. So this we have talked about now. And then Krishna is first and 2, he's basically telling introduction and glorification of this knowledge. And oh, sorry, you are able to see this, Prabhu, or should I increase this thing?
It's not.
The text 1 and 2, basically understanding this chapter help one to attain liberation and transcendental nature like Krishna, and knowing which all the sages have attained perfection. So in the 4.1 and 14.2, Krishna basically tells the importance of this knowledge, and in the discussion of the purport, If you see, so what was revealed in chapter 7 to 12, Krishna reveals in detail about himself as the absolute truth, the supreme personality of the Godhead. So these are the chapters 7 to 12 are predominantly known to be chapters oriented towards bhakti. How to understand chapter 14? Through the process of philosophical speculation. So I repeatedly told this, right? So these are the chapters where we must do a lot of discussion, because these are very practical oriented things, and they become a foundation for us to follow what is told in 7 and 12. What is the result of such learning? Freedom from material entanglement. One comes to an understanding of devotional service. You got it? 7 and 12 talked about devotional service, and gives an understanding of the devotional service. If you understand what is devotional service, why we should do it, in what way we can make ourselves conducive to practice the devotional service is important. So that is the reason why we always find this friction within us, friction around us also, right? We want to become devotees, but we don't make ourselves, our life conducive and have the knowledge on how to practice the devotional service. So that's why we either showcase that we are devotees, but we are not devotees. We want to practice devotional service, we cannot practice devotional service. We want to see others also practice devotional service in our own families. We see that they're falling too much, and that causes friction, right? It's like that I somehow want to, every day I hear that a lot of people are getting up at 4 o'clock Brahma Murta chanting, and I decide to get up at 4 o'clock. But unless I condition my life around me, condition my body, condition my activities around me, how can I do that? I may do it by force couple of days time. After that, again I'll go back. In our Telugu, in my mother tongue, they say kukka toka wankara. That means the dog's tail is always teda. It can't be straightened. You can straighten it for some time, but it cannot. But if you know the understanding, if I make my body, my mind conducive enough to know that if this is important and this can be done and does not harm my life, because in some people they may have to work late, they may have to drive in the evening at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. If they get up at 3 o'clock, 3:30 and chant and go to the office, what happens if they stuck at the traffic jam? They're not able to drive, right? They not only cause harm to themselves, and they may cause harm to others in the forcing themselves to do a early morning chanting. So it depends upon who can do that, who cannot do that. It's our own, our how do we condition our life to do that. What I'm saying is, trying to do something, a tenet, practice a tenet of devotional service without understanding will not sustain us long. It will not give us any good result also. It causes more problem, because we cannot understand ourselves, we cause problem to others. So understanding and making ourselves cultivatable to practice devotional service, to sow the seeds of devotion, knowledge is essential for us. So that's why these chapters also have got a very good importance, particularly the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th. They're all part of the knowledge section of the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. Is there any comment anyone wants? So, and why this knowledge is, okay, I'll slightly make it bigger. Yeah, why this knowledge is proclaimed to be superior to all? Understanding the conditioning of the modes of 3 modes is a powerful tool to assist one on the path of self-realization. So this is the statement, this is a statement that we can by heart. If we have to get interest in 14th chapter, understanding the conditioning of the 3 modes is a powerful tool to assist one on the path of self-realization. Yeah, if we do not realize who we are, there's no point in reading complete Bhagavad Gita, right? Unless we know who we are, unless we realize who we are, then only we are. So we need to make ourselves compatible and conducive to get that. And by this knowledge, many sages have attained perfection, transferred to spiritual world. Krishna basically gives us a motivational thing, saying that I'm not only telling you, several people have already done it. That means here Krishna is telling us an example that somebody has done it, and is also giving us an assurance it's a time-tested technique. People have practiced it, people have achieved it. So there's a hope that we can also do to some extent. One can attain transcendental nature like Krishna and thus attains liberation. And whoever understands chapter 4 will attain perfection. My God, it's a very, very powerful statement coming from Srila Prabhupada's purport. Yeah, whoever understands chapter 14. So from next week onwards, we will try to understand. So in the third and fourth shlokas, we have seen Krishna is basically telling how the soul comes into the material world, is placed within the three modes of material nature. He creates the world, and the world gets impregnated, and then he also comes in the world, in the living entities as Atma, as the Jivatma and Paramatma. Material area is the mother, supplying the living entity with the body. The Lord puts him there by his potent glance and thus impregnates the material world with the nature, with the seed, and that's how we came into being. How the soul comes into the material world and is placed within the modes of material nature is explained there. Material nature is the mother, supplying the living entities. Total material substance is called Brahman, the source of birth. Lord impregnates that Brahman with the living entities. And there is an analogy Srila Prabhupada gives. This is also part of the Bhakti Shastri analogy discussion, right? So Mangalananda Sutta Prabhu, would you like to tell this about the analogy?
Prabhuji, it's too small for me to read. Which analogy?
Scorpion analogy. Now it should be able to see, Prabhu.
Rice, rice. Scorpion is born out of rice. Scorpion is
Prabhu,
born
are you
out.
able to see that?
Yeah. Like scorpion lays eggs in rice, but the rice is not the cause of the scorpion. So
yes, correct. That this refutes that material nature is the cause of the birth of the living entities. Actual seed is given by the Supreme. So material nature doesn't give anything. The actual seed is given by the Supreme Lord. And then 1413 explains gives an explanation of the world as follows. Everything that plays is to the combination of Kshetra, Kshetrajna. This is given in the 13th chapter, and 1413 reveals that. And the combination of the living entity is made possible by the Supreme God himself. And it gives a description of the Mahatvatva. It's called the total cause of the cosmic manifestation, total substance of the material cause, in which there are modes of material nature. Sometimes it's called Brahman, and it is from the Mundaka Upanishad. Mahat Brahma, the great Brahman, refers to the material nature. This is what Srila Prabhupada is explaining. Constituted by 24 elements, which constitute the inferior energy. The living entity constitutes the superior energy, and that's how he tries to exploit the inferior energy, and in that process he gets totally entangled. So this is the summary of the section A of the 14th chapter. Talks about Krishna as the seed-giving father. He talks about the material nature, why he impregnates, and he says that this is an important knowledge for us to understand and then practice, so that we can be put in we can put ourselves in a position where we can understand the tenets of devotional service, which are very well explained from the chapters, in the chapters 7 to 12 that we have already covered. So this is a very important thing. It's a very powerful tool for us. And after today, I'll post that Vedic Personality of Index thing into the chat box, in our forum. Please download and try to do that. And then we can move on into the 14th chapter with that enthusiasm to discuss, to understand, to unpack, to realize what is being told in the 14th chapter in a slow and a very solid, in Hindi they call it manthan karte karte jayenge, ताकि हमको ये चैप्टर का जो ज्ञान अच्छी तरह हमारे ज़हन में आए. So we will try to churn this knowledge, turn this whatever is Srila Prabhupada is telling through purports, so that that consolidated cream of that knowledge can get into our heart, so that we can practice to some extent. And why we should practice? Because we need to. It can help us to relieve some of our anxieties, some of our troubles, the way we see this world, the way we interact with this world, the way we deal with the people around us. Not always. I am not saying this will solve all our problems, but at least to some extent, if it can help to help us become a little bit more happy, a little less unhappy, I think that is good enough. It's a good bargain for spending 1.5 hours a week. I think, in my opinion, it's like that. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. So